Yes, absolutely. Okay, obviously if you're still watching, it means you want to know more than that. But before I begin, this video covers both the Sony a7R IV as well as the updated Sony a7R IVA. Now, I'll put a link in the description below in case you want to read more about it, but the basic gist of it is the a7R IVA has an updated LCD screen and it has an updated USB port. I've always assumed the R stands for resolution because the a7R series has always been catered to those who want the highest resolution possible in 35mm. If you're after the highest image quality and you don't mind giving your camera plenty of light and stability to get it, then the a7R is for you. It's for more methodical and choreographed photography, or whatever your needs are when it comes to specific image quality. So a word of advice, if your line of work doesn't require that super high resolution, I'd probably look at other cameras. It's not that the R4 is a bad camera, because Sony cameras, in fact all modern cameras, tend to be pretty good at doing just about everything. It's just that if resolution isn't your primary concern, there are plenty of other cameras out there that can do more for you and for less money. Particularly if video or speed is your primary factor, Sony have their sports and video specific cameras, with the a7S with low light sensitivity suitable for video, and the a9 with insane sports performance, as well as the upcoming a7 IV as sort of a jack of all trades. Still, when it comes to uncompromising image quality, the a7R IV is still king. I wouldn't however go as far as saying that it's medium format quality in a 35mm package, because that simply isn't true. Medium format, even crop sensors like the Fuji GFX series, has a starkly different feel and depth to 35mm. Even though Sony's sensors are amazing, you can't quite match the resolving power of bigger glass in medium format. Despite being a little long in the tooth by Sony's own standards, as they have traditionally updated their a7R models every 2 years, the R4 is still a joy to use today. Unlike 10 years ago, where every new model makes enormous leaps in technology, camera technology is far more mature in this day and age. The a7R IV feels as modern as any other modern camera. Sure, it doesn't do 4K 60p video or have the new Sony menu system, but the specs are still more than reasonable. Before the Sony, I was shooting on the Canon 5DSR, the older Canon equivalent high-resolution camera, and even to this day I think this camera is fantastic at doing its job, but I had to switch from the Canon for one specific reason back in 2019. The difference in chip speeds and memory buffer from Canon's 2015 release of the 5DSR to Sony's 2019 release of the a7R IV is quite enormous, and I was missing a lot of crucial shots in my work. I didn't need a speed demon camera, but shooting became more efficient when I updated to a modern camera. The Canon R5 wasn't available at the time, but I often wonder if I would have stayed in the Canon camp had it been available. In case you've forgotten, Canon was extremely late pulling their finger out in this segment, and one could still argue they have yet to truly replace the Canon 5DSR, even after 6 years. By contrast, Sony appears to update their a7R models once every 2 years. And sure, there are faster cameras out there now in 2021, but commercial car photography has very specific requirements, as my clients are literally obsessed with billboard resolution. So whilst image quality and resolution remains a primary requirement, speed is still a massive bonus, and this has more than enough of it. It's not the fastest in the West, but for what I need in 2021, it's more than fast enough. Image quality is where the camera really shines. Slap it on the tripod and pair this with a sharp lens, and profit. It can be a bit noisy at high ISO, but this camera wasn't optimized for low light. Shoot at base ISO and you get that renowned gold class dynamic range in your files. This was leaps and bounds ahead of the Canon 5DSR, though most latest gen cameras, including the R5, reportedly have solid dynamic range performance as well. But for those of us with the most discriminating eye, so long as you pair this with the right lenses, you get this incredibly detailed images. You get billboard-sized croppability in a versatile 35mm mirrorless package. It has more resolution than the flagship Sony A1, but significantly cheaper. Sure, it does a whole lot less than the A1 as well, but not everyone needs those features. Its biggest competitor is probably the Canon R5, which again wasn't available at the time I switched from the Canon 5DSR. Now the R5 is a bit more of a hybrid style camera, like a pumped up, juiced up Sony a7 III. It tries to do everything well, but it falls short in total resolution to the Sony, and the Sony is still marginally cheaper. It's certainly not worth switching to the R5 if you're already invested in Sony glass. I'm not even certain we'll get a new release camera with the global chip shortage this year, but if we do, I think we'll get a predictable iteration over the Mark IV, similar to the Mark IV over the a7R Mark III. We may or may not get a bump in resolution like the Mark III and Mark II being the same, but it was still a much better camera to use, such as battery life being fixed in the Mark III. At minimum, I think we'd see a swivel LCD and the updated menus that we see in the a7S Mark III. Speaking of updated menus, the ones in the a7R4 are unfortunately still the same old insane system. I remember being talked out of Sony for years over fear-mongering of their menus, but I found that a poorly designed menu system mostly only affects just learning how to use a new camera. Once you get the feel for it, it's as quick to use the menu as any other. I think the issue with Sony menus is grossly over-exaggerated, and whilst the full swivel LCD in the next generation Sonys are welcome, I feel the tilt screen in this generation still does a remarkable job. I mostly rely on the excellent electronic viewfinder anyway, especially when reviewing photos to my clients. The clarity and dynamic range is much better in the viewfinder. Now I know a lot of you guys out there, like me, jumped from the Canon 5DSR to the Sony a7R Mark IV. You might have even jumped on the Sony bandwagon sooner with the Sony a7R II and the Sony a7R III. But for now, even in 2021, I still think this is the ultimate workhorse camera for landscape and commercial work like car photography.